So they can be quite simple. I was surprised how simple some of these spaces can be. If you only have a budget for paint, a rocking chair, and a hue light bulb, you can quite easily create a sensory experience that's much better than maybe what the students or staff have.
Hello, Stephen Parker. Welcome to the Design Hive. Everybody, Stephen Parker is a behavioral health planner and mental health design subject matter expert based in our nation's capital. I have worked with him many times. He's always fun to chat with. And today we're talking about sensory-enabled architecture, which might be a new term for many people. So, Stephen, if you could first kind of tell us what that is, and then kind of tell us why we need it, that would be very cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. So sensory-enabled architecture, or SEE, are immersive experiential environments that leverage sensory elements to help individuals self-regulate and enhance their mental well-being. It differs from space to space and place to place, but I think we're all aware that the built environment has a role to play in our own mental well-being, and it can be a tool to aid in that.
Excellent. How did you come up with this, or what in your career led you to this idea of sensory-enabled architecture?
So within healthcare environments principally, but also education and other typologies, there's a need to craft sensory environments for individuals with a range of needs. Whether it's a child on the spectrum who may have a different sensory perception than you or I, an individual experiencing a crisis whose perception of reality is either helped or hindered by the built environment around them, or those with memory care issues or any number of sort of complex health needs that sensory elements would really enhance their care, their sense of calm, or help alleviate stress, from a hospital to a clinic to a school, and everywhere in between.
Great. And what kind of research have you been doing on C, if we can use that abbreviation?
Sure.
What have you and your team been doing sort of to explore this idea and to sort of figure out what these actual environments look like?
Sure. So we have launched a Stantec ZenDen to help actually move this research forward. There's a number of evidence-based design studies that inform how the built environment can help you self-regulate through different sensory manipulations and kind of sense of control and choice. And so our ZenDen was a kind of coalescing around, hey, where can we move this forward where research can really inform our practice at the point of need? We wanted to create a pop-up sensory experience and a research platform that can be rapidly deployed, different settings. It's modular, prototypical that way, crafted to higher education, K-12, or other settings where you could rapidly deploy it, crafted to the sensory needs of that population, students, staff, healthcare workers, patients, and then get feedback, real-time feedback. So through user surveys, as well as anecdotal interviews, and kind of using this as a rapid feedback loop to then implement those lessons learned in our projects and meet the pain points of our clients in real time, and then also help us inform our practices across Stantec when it comes to these spaces agnostic of typology.
Okay, so that's a lot to take in.
Sure.
To take a step back, say for someone who's sort of new to this idea of sensory-enabled architecture, you walk someone into a ZenDen, what kind of things are there? How has the space been outfitted, and what is it supposed to do? Or I know we have a couple different iterations or spaces within the ZenDen. Maybe we could talk about those as well, but just kind of give people a little bit of a audio picture of that.
Sure. So a ZenDen is a pop-up sensory experience and research platform. We go into a space, whether it's a conference setting or a classroom, what have you, and we pop up a series of sensory pods. Some are geared towards individuals that are very sensory sensitive. hypersensitive, you might say. They really need a low stimulation environment, and they're just trying to very overwhelmed by the world. And so, what about that first pod, that first sensory experience? We call it the cavern. It helped them kind of calm down, self-regulate, avoid stimulation. The next one that we came up with was a more hyposensitive, or those that are stimuli seeking kind of settings, where individuals that, if you've ever had a toddler or a kid that's got a lot of wiggles and needs a lot of either movement or stimulation, it's really intended to help them seek out those stimuli that help them self-regulate and craft that sensory experience for themselves. And so that sense of control is really important for crafting agency and feeling as if, yeah, I can go into a space, I can change my lighting, I can change the furniture that I'm using that gives me vestibular movement. That there's actually the smell of nature, let's say petrichor, being pumped into the space, taking you from the built environment to maybe a more naturalistic one. And then our third one was Meadow Walk, which is more of social sensory experiences. Oftentimes, we don't always get a space to ourselves. We have to experience spaces with other people, and that changes our sense of psychological safety. So it helps individuals understand that their sensory experience is crafted by the space and the people in it. So their understanding of proximatics, their sense of psychological safety, based in that setting. So we have these different sensory experiences. We brought them together in a ZenDen, and it gives these individuals choices to choose to self-regulate themselves through a number of sensory elements, all brought together through architecture.
Fantastic. Where do you see, or where are we already seeing application of these sensory environments, or are there projects or there are sort of prototypes that you're working on for different clients where we are using some of these ideas? And then my second question is going to be, are these rooms evolving? Are you sort of learning what works and what doesn't work along the way? And what are some examples of that? Like what's kind of worked?
Sure. So thankfully, my role, I've had the privilege of working with a diverse set of teams across Stantec, and globally. So within just health settings, we've seen it manifest in a single occupant sensory room in a clinic for kids on the spectrum. They may be differently abled, or they might be experiencing a health facility for the first time. So they might be very stressed. So it helps them maybe self-regulate and deal with the stress of just helping them get through treatment. We've seen this not just in clinics, but in hospitals where maybe a child is going through first the reception area. And even when you're waiting, you might be anxious about your treatment. So what about the waiting space can have sensory elements built into it and designed to help a child sort of deal with the anxiety of seeing a doctor for the first time, or in pre-op or post-op care, where they're very bored. They might be in pain or discomfort. What about the sensory elements can really help them go through that experience as therapeutically as possible? We've seen it in mental behavioral health and settings for a long time, for a variety of reasons. If you're heavily medicated, your sense of reality might be vastly changed. And so dialing different sensory elements like your lighting, or even the feeling of wind, or transporting yourself from the built environment to the natural environment might really help you deal with a very stressful situation and enhance healing as well. In emergency departments, where you have a lot of things going on, noises, lights, a lot of people, and so forth. So embedding sensory rooms or sensory elements into emergency departments to really help those in crisis or experiencing severe trauma, physical trauma, as well as the emotional and psychological trauma of needing to be in an emergency department. And then outside of healthcare, we've seen an explosion of interest. K-12 and higher education is implementing far more of these. So if it's a school district in Texas that is actually deploying sensory rooms and mental health counseling suites across their entire district, we're actually helping craft those spaces architecturally through interior design and engineering, so that they really enhance the learning experience. Or with kids that have behavioral health or sensory issues, and how to craft that environment to really enhance their learning and kind of make it a space where they're less anxious to go to school. And the built environment is really an additional tool for teaching and healing and kind of sensory supports. To workplace environments of the future that craft to neurodiverse individuals, even to stadiums and airports, where we're seeing the need for sensory enabled architecture to be embedded within these spaces where people are going to and fro and might be very excited or overwhelmed by the social anxiety of being around crowds. So there's really a broadening of the horizon for these applications in a variety of settings.
That's great. That's amazing. Are there things that you've learned don't work the way you thought, or are there things that you've learned that work better than you expected? Has there been anything that surprised you, or that people latched onto that you didn't expect them to?
Sure. I think people are very different, place to place, community to community, and context to context. So sometimes we've offered different sensory elements that weren't as well utilized as others. So I think in a recent school district that we implemented and for behavioral health counseling suite, they really want an extremely low stimulation environment, and not a lot of actual control over the sensory elements, but more of crafting of a low stimulation environment, simply because their school was quite overwhelming from a sensory standpoint, with being high social density is a big aspect of that. Just not being able to give kids the alone time to kind of recuperate, collect their thoughts between classes or between major exams or things of that nature. So they can be quite simple. I was surprised how simple some of these spaces can be. If you only have a budget for paint, a rocking chair, and a hue light bulb, you can quite easily create a sensory experience that's much better than maybe what the students or staff have, especially staff. I think I would say, a lot of interest in staff too. Just we see it in healthcare settings around staff burnout. And so the interest from different stakeholders was always, I wouldn't say unexpected, but the attention around, hey, we could have this for our teachers. We could have this for our counselors. We could have this for any number of support staff that, all would benefit from sensory enabled architecture and their day-to-day work lives. That, just was surprising and serendipitous at times.
Great. And when you talk about the user having some control in some of these settings, what and you might have mentioned this earlier, but what kind of things would they control? And how would they control it? What's a typical thing they'd be able to control?
Sure. So, for example, if the lighting range, we've seen a lot more in healthcare, is that tunable lights, just the ability to turn and dim your lights or brighten them as you need, is very kind of basic, but not necessarily the case in other typologies. Once you add color to that, you can imagine that a kid's perception of reality might change very differently. If, for example, I'm colorblind, attuning to light for the space to really allow me to see or feel more comfortable or sensitize me better to a color range. Even the sense of tactility, usually for younger kids, more so, when you're very kind of touchy-feely, if you will. What is that experience at their different scales of age? They're much closer to the ground or to the wall surface than maybe us as adults, or simply the fact that they have the ability to self-soothe and have agency and autonomy to do so. And you can get far more sophisticated with how they attune themselves, or how have a provider or a caregiver help them attune their sensory elements to their needs. And once you sort of give them the keys to the kingdom, if you will, that idea that just the concept that the built environment can help them self-regulate, and you add the layers of sensory control on top of that, it can really help an individual who might otherwise be paralyzed by social anxiety or stressors of some kind, to really give them a tool to navigate the built environment in their world in a way that they may not have had otherwise.
Fantastic. So what's the next program for the ZenDen or sensory enabled architecture? What's the latest thing that's happening, or what are you doing next?
Well, thankfully, my partner in crime, one of them, Gwen, just hopped on, and I'm sure she'll be able to take this question and run with it without any prompting whatsoever and background as to the rest of our conversation. So I'll leave it to her to talk about that in detail.
Yeah, Gwen, I'm going to introduce you really quick. We're mid recording here, so this is like this. You couldn't be under more pressure right now. But Gwen Morgan is our discipline leader for interior design, based in Plano, Texas, and one of the researchers behind sensory enabled architecture in the ZenDen. Thanks for joining us, Gwen. I was sort of asking what's next in the world of C and ZenDen and Stantec. What do we have coming up? What's sort of the next stage for this? Are we refining it? Are we presenting it in other places? What's happening?
Yeah, well, I'm sure, Stephen has shared some of the things we've done recently with the ZenDen, because it's kind of a prototype pop-up experience. We've been able to showcase it in a number of places and get different types of feedback from different audiences. So the next place that we're taking it to try and gather more feedback is actually to Texas A&M, where we will be installing it in a place where it can be used, by students, by teachers, by the building occupants, much like it has been in past installations. But we'll also have some opportunities to gather some unique feedback, including some biometric data and some other ways in which we can measure the physical response that people have to spending time in the space. So most of our previous data collection or surveys or, qualitative research has been around, asking people how the space has impacted them and learning from those answers and their responses, which has been great. But I think having those physical data points will also be really interesting to learn, how a space and how that environment can really impact somebody physiologically.
Yeah, right. Like when I sit in the ZenDen, does it bring my heart rate down?
Exactly.
Am I actually relaxed, or am I just saying I'm relaxed? That's really interesting. Can you both tell me how you got into this side of design? If you could, share a little bit of your career journey and how you ended up here, that'd be really interesting.
And do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm, by profession, I'm an interior designer. I think interior designers in general are already, pretty keen on the human experience and how spaces can help shape that. I think that's a unique value and expertise that we generally bring. I have a personal interest in research, and I've been a part of the research and benchmarking team that the education sector runs for many years. In my discipline leader role, I also and I'm involved with an organization called the Interior Design Educators Council, which has been a good opportunity for me to stay connected to the academic community for interior design. And this specific topic came of interest to me specifically through an opportunity to engage with research that was kind of the overlap of those areas. So we found, our academic partnership for the UNC Greensboro installation through the Interior Design Educators Council. And we had, that research and benchmarking team on the Stantec side to help support the effort. That was kind of how the idea got introduced to me. And I found, the outcomes from that project to be really interesting. And it, prompted me and others, within the sector to say, hey, can we explore this further? This really seems to be resonating with what our clients have been saying recently. And so it's just really taken off from there.
Amazing. Stephen, how about you? How did you get into this stuff?
Sure. So I'm a licensed architect, and I've had a focus on healthcare environments and specifically mental health and behavioral health settings for quite some time. And those are fairly unique environments for a range of patients who have a different perception of reality through their mental state or their kind of sensory perception of the world or their medication. And so that's born from a long history in my family with mental and behavioral health considerations that have given me a sense of purpose in my practice to focus on mental health and well-being. And that includes sensory environments that we've designed into these spaces for a long time, whether that is in an inpatient setting, dealing with patients with acute psychosis and how the built environment can really enhance their treatment, and I think make it more therapeutic and dignified and humanizing. And translating that to research has been part of my career for a long time. Trying to think back here. My graduate thesis was PTSD and traumatic brain injury design for wounded warriors. My buddy's coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and to my father being a geropsychiatric patient with delusional paranoia, to having friends on the spectrum, and seeing that there's very few tools that most people have to help others. And for us as designers, it's our design skills, and seeing that the built environment can really enhance that quality of life that Gwen talks about so eloquently. I think that's one reason that attracted me to design and research of these space types, that the senses can really be enhanced, and the architecture of the world can help and not hinder any individual and any sensory experience.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing your story with us. So, Gwen, one thing we didn't talk about was the work you did with UNC Greensboro. Can you talk about that partnership a little bit and what you learned there?
I'd love to. Yeah, we partnered a couple of years ago with Amanda Gale and Lisa Williams in UNC Greensboro to convert an old office space on their campus into a sensory room. It was a very low budget intervention, but we were able to make changes to the flooring, the paint, some lighting, some new furniture, and then we had a few accessory items like a scent diffuser, some biophilic murals, and a fan. And students were surveyed before and after spending about 30 minutes in the space. And the goal of our surveys was to find out, one, what's the effect of multisensory environments on anxiety and stress for students specifically. And then two, what are the strategies that college students use to cope with stress and anxiety? And then three, what are the most successful elements of that multisensory environment that, were the most effective pieces in reducing stress and anxiety? So we learned quite a bit from that study. We found that most students who spent time in the room, and they did indicate that they had moderate stress or anxiety prior to entering the room. And the majority of students had a statistically significant reduction in their perceived stress and anxiety after using the room, which was really interesting. Some of the things that people seemed to especially like were mostly about having a sense of personalized control of the space. So some of their favorite elements were things like the adjustable lighting or the ability to choose, what sound you were hearing, adjusting, the airflow within the space. So even more than I would say those elements in and of themselves, it was about having control of those elements that people seem to find particularly impactful. We also asked them, is there anything that you wish you had in here that we didn't provide? And people mentioned they love the option to kind of recline or lay down in a more relaxing position. We didn't really provide any furniture that did that. And also having something to kind of fidget with. We didn't have many physical manipulatives in that installation. So a couple of those things, we were able to address when we designed the ZenDen and had that pop-up experience. We were able to take those lessons learned, from that research and apply them to our next iteration. So improving with each time.
Right, and that was pre-ZenDen. That sort of informed
Yes.
the development of the ZenDen. Cool. And so one thing Stephen was saying was that one of the sort of things he'd learned from the ZenDen application in different settings was that it could be so simple, and the potential users would still see application for it, and they would see application for it with their staff. And it almost seems like this idea has, the potential to really catch on. Is that sort of exciting for you folks to see that this isn't just a small niche, that it's something that really could be used in a variety of places? Is that sort of daunting, because you sort of have to figure out how to present it to all these different environments and different kinds of people? In other words, it seems to me like it's taking off pretty quickly as an idea, right?
Yeah, I think it is very exciting. I mean, as designers and architects, I think we're always interested in the ways that the spaces we design can really improve quality of life for the people who are inhabiting them. And, mental health is one of the concerns that many of our clients, regardless of sectors, really share. How do we help support and nurture the mental health and well-being of the people who are working with us, or who we're teaching, who we're interacting with? And so, the solution to mental health is a very, complex and multifaceted problem that's going to require a lot of different solutions from different angles. But as designers, right, we're uniquely positioned to figure out how the environment can be one of those tools that helps people, help support people's mental health. So I think it's exciting to have data, or to learn specifically the different ways that we can help people improve the quality of their life through design.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one benefit of our collaborations across disciplines and sectors and typologies is that we're not seeing it through one lens. And that's the same thing that our clients see, is that they have multiple lenses of the people they care for, or teach, or otherwise are responsible for. So whether it's an individual looking to enhance the peak performance and their flow state in a workplace environment, or to self-regulate an overwhelmed airport setting, or a student kind of struggling with sensory issues in a learning environment, that horizon is very broad and extremely fertile area to explore as designers, to really enhance how the built environment can be that tool for self-regulation and aid mental well-being in whatever form it needs to be.
Sure, and it probably makes you very popular across the firm, right? I mean, you'll talk to people in K through 12 one day, and someone from healthcare might be connecting with you another day. So you're sort of becoming these superstars within Stantec, or maybe you're always were superstars. But you're sort of collaborating across what we call sectors, right?
Well, it's certainly been very interesting to me. My focus in my career has been around the design of educational spaces, so that's where my focus is, nearly all the time. But yes, since sort of embarking, on this research and creating this prototype and learning from it, people have reached out about including these types of spaces or features on their projects that I never would have expected, including an airport, a soccer stadium, places that, if you stop and think about it, can be quite overwhelming, quite overstimulating, crowded, busy. So it makes perfect sense, but it's maybe not the application that we've always thought of first in the past. So it's been really interesting to see, all the different places that people are interested in implementing those kinds of ideas.
I think that the whole team is sensational around this sensory effort that we have going on. So I think that makes us better together, and realizing that it blurs these lines that we are always kind of used to, but we get such fascinating collaborations and insights and inspiration from each other along the way.
Amazing. Well, do you promise to come back in 6 months and tell us what's happening with the ZenDen, and maybe you can tell us more about the projects that are incorporating this?
Absolutely.
Very cool, guys. Well, once again, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us on the Design Hive, and I promise we'll have you back here soon, whether you like it or not. I'll drag you in. But yeah, thanks so much, and talk soon.
Sounds great. Thank you again.